I'm Sister Melita Chozik of the Order of the Adorers of the Blood of Christ. We are now located in the convent of Nova Topola. As an order, we had a pretty hard time of it during the war, but it's hard to talk about it. Horrific things happened. There are so many memories that are really bad. We were raided a few times. Sometimes they threw explosives in. At others, they simply broke in. Finally, in 1995, we were driven out of the home. The Serbian, let's call it a military force, gathered us all up wherever we were. We had just finished preparing the preserves for the winter and a little bit of firewood, and we thought that we could endure here for the winter. But they sought us out wherever we were and interrogated us. Who are you? What nationality are you? What is your name? There were other women who were there helping us, and, depending on how they presented themselves, if they said they were Croat, they were forced into a car to cross the Sava River.
The convent of the Adorers of the Precious Blood was ransacked and badly damaged during the recent war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Apart from the terror that the sisters experienced, what's particularly disturbing is the fact that to this day no light has been thrown on the disappearance of Father Ratko Grgić, the parish priest who was forcefully taken from his home in 1992. For that reason, with particular delicacy, the head of the order has decided to set up the community again in Nova Topola.
We are nuns who have a vow of obedience. Our superiors were trying to think up ways in which our convent would have the mission of being a means of reconciliation in the area. They tried to find the right way to do it.
The means through which they achieved this was through an apostolate of curing with medicinal herbs, which their sister convent had been doing in Bosanski Aleksandrovac before the war.
When we arrived, we thought that perhaps we should bring the practice of herb collecting to this convent too, so that we wouldn't just be an end in ourselves, but that we should contribute to the peace process by reaching out to our neighbours, reconciling and finally forgiving. And that's how this work came about. We hadn't even fixed up the convent for daily living, and people were already beginning to call in seeking medicines, saying, "Sister, so-and-so saved me many years ago by giving me such and such a medicine. Can you make up the same stuff?" So that was our motivation, and it really took off.
In order to begin their apostolate, the convent had to undergo repairs at least of the essential requirements and the surrounding areas. An international charity organisation of the Catholic Church, Aid to the Church in Need, reacted positively to this cry for help with their donations.
This is where the first hospital was when the first sisters were driven out. Here all was overgrown, derelict. We didn't have any access to it then. Passing from the road, we could see that it was all overgrown. The convent couldn't even be seen the way it can be seen today. We have been here for 4 years now, and we are continuously cleaning, although it's in bad condition still, so you can imagine how it was back then.
People from all over the country, regardless of nationality or creed, aren't waiting for the convent to finish restoration. They come looking for help, and they go away satisfied and grateful.
We came here with the idea that we want to be at their disposal, that we wish to give glory to God, to make reparation for the errors of these people. In our prayers, we intercede for all those who have done wrong to our sisters, not just in this area, but everywhere. Not just in this convent, but all over Banja Luka. I always felt that someone must make reparation for them, so that their souls could be redeemed, saved, or at least have the opportunity of an encounter with the true God.
The war brought about horrific consequences that no one could ever have envisaged. The director of Caritas describes the atmosphere that preceded the war here in Bosnia-Herzegovina.
We didn't actually believe that a war would break out, even though there were a lot of indications that it might. I remember that the older members of my family said that this would eventually lead to war, but I was taught that this was fraternity and unity, that our army was the Yugoslav People's Army and that it would protect everyone. Since we weren't communist and we weren't really supportive of that system of government, but we didn't see ourselves as having enemies, we didn't hold anything against anyone. We had never committed offences against anyone, although that was being put across in the media at that time. For the more experienced, was reason for alarm. Personally, I just thought it was part of making us into a democracy, that it would go from one extreme to another before it would stabilize with time. But in retrospect, when I think about what was written in the Belgrade press, I would say that it was a systematic preparation for war. But that's a conclusion I came to in hindsight. Those of us from the area had already been warned that something was in the pipeline. We saw and heard about arms being supplied. We heard that our neighbours were under threat. We couldn't understand by whom, because the other two nationalities in question were unarmed. When the war broke out in Croatia, and all that chaos with it, we were still under communism here. However, we now know that we really hadn't any experience, and we didn't realize in time what the whole thing was about. Arms had been distributed among the Serbian population here, and the army here at that time really was in the hands of one people only. Little by little, the officers that belonged to other nations were pushed aside. Then the same with the soldiers, so that the Yugoslavian army had actually become a purely Serbian armed force.
The intimidation of the Serbian majority over the other citizens of Banja Luka, together with the anxiety and economic breakdown, marked the beginning of the tragedies.
Soon the situation became very tense. It wasn't immediately outright warfare, but this area became more and more cut off. Inflation grew terribly fast, so that from morning to nightfall money could lose up to 100% of its value. I mean, it was devalued. A panic began to be felt among the people, a feeling that you couldn't rely on anything. Your salary or your pension just didn't cover everything. If you were a little late, it squared the accounts of the house, but after 2 or 3 days you could only buy a fraction of what you could have bought before with it. Already the basic essentials were lacking. In 1991, that was the first time that we went looking for help to a parish in Slavonia, in neighbouring Croatia, and we got 3 tons of flour from that parish. We brought it here, and that was our first handout with regards to material help. We had to look after the local people here more and more. Some of them had been fired because they refused to sign up for the army. There were people whose property had been raided, so that more and more people came here, not just Catholics. Orthodox and Muslims came too to Caritas. We were open all the time for whoever was in need, and in that way I think we did a lot to ease the tension in this area.
Because healthcare didn't even minimally exist for the Catholics here, Caritas of the Diocese of Banja Luka offered to open up its own voluntary healthcare centre with the help of donors.
At the end of 1993, in an old building belonging to the diocese, a clinic was set up where doctors were employed. They were mostly Croats and some Bosnians and one Serb. There were about 45 doctors and nurses whom we employed, and we specialized in certain areas. Besides the general practitioner, there was an ophthalmologist department, a section dealing with internal medicine, a section for otolaryngology, for gynecology, a dental unit, as well as a medical laboratory and a pharmacy. Almost all the returnees are at the same time patients in our clinic, and they are not only Croats, a large number are Muslims and Orthodox as well. There is still a significant number of people who don't have enough to eat. We have an opportunity to observe that because we have a patronage service that visits the homes of the people. So there are a number of people who need help with the very basics. Families are torn apart. That structure which carried the families here, where the younger ones looked after the elderly, no longer exists. Many of them are abandoned. Many of their children have been killed or are God knows where in the world. We have some really tragic cases. Some of them have no neighbors.
Even after the war, Caritas activities are ongoing. It is precisely thanks to this help that the citizens of Banja Luka are surviving. Anja VUKOVIĆ is vividly aware that none of it would have been possible without donors such as aid to the church in need.
We would never have survived if it hadn't been for those good people in foreign countries who sent humanitarian help. I remember those trucks, those containers bringing help, either through the Red Cross or through Caritas.
Anja involved herself in the Caritas patronage programme. She has found meaning for her life in looking after the old and helpless of Banja Luka.
In this patronage programme of the Diocese of Banja Luka, we have 9 members, 4 of whom are nurses and 5 carers. We go from here to visit people who are mostly alone or abandoned, who don't have anyone, or who cannot walk, and they just need someone they can lean on. I wanted to do this work primarily because the pain of these people touched me. When we go to visit them and they bless us, when they say to me, "Anna, may God give you back at least a fifth of what I wish for you," then I really don't need anything else. When you have a chance to receive that sort of blessing, then that is an immeasurable joy and satisfaction. For me, that is a treasure that you cannot estimate, and I know that it will be paid back over my lifetime. I know that the choices that I am making are actually the greatest riches that anyone can pick. I'm really content and proud to have the privilege of working in this way.
Anja lives in the village of Presnaci near Banja Luka. The people of her village experienced their Golgotha in 1995 at the end of the war. That's when the Serbian army came to destroy the village church. On that morning, the parish priest, Father Filip Lukenda, and Sister Cecilia Grgic, the parish catechist, were tortured, killed and burned.
At about 4 in the morning, you could hear the detonation. Since I live here at a higher altitude than the church, it sounded like a strong earthquake to me. At 4, the house shook and the windows rattled. Early in the morning, we came down to the church. There was a crowd of people. I remember it was Tuesday, the 12th of May, 1995. It was full of police and the army. We immediately asked where the priest and the nun were, and they told us they didn't know.
Even today, the director of the Catholic Schools Centre, Father Ivica Bojinovic, remembers that tragic morning very vividly.
I remember at 7:30 in the morning, someone came down to the diocese centre and told us that the parish church in Presnacha was destroyed and the parish house was burnt down. I arrived with Monsignor Carlo. The police stopped us there. The house was still burning. We asked what happened to the parish priest. The answer was, he left last night. We found out later on that the convoy of vehicles that had carried this out, the car belonging to the parish priest was among them. So everyone thought that the priest had left. The day after, we discovered that both of their lives were lost, and the even more distressing news that their bodies had been burnt on the premises of the parish house.
The church has been reconstructed from the donations of aid to the church in need. Its reconstruction means so much to Anya and her neighbours.
The church is now rebuilt. Here in Presnac, we have a beautiful church, thanks to good-hearted people and all the donors who helped. Somehow faith and hope in a better future has returned, that we can have our church again, that we have somewhere to mix and to pray. All the donors who helped us really showed their solidarity. But what was even nicer for me was when some local Orthodox people and some Muslims helped us with the building. In that building, we showed each other once more that it is possible to work together and to mix. That is what impressed me most. Religious institutions are good because they inspire us to tolerate others and to trust. We are often arrogant, like this or like that, and yet, when we look at it all through the gospel and through God's eyes, then we realise and conclude that we should be together and we must forgive one another. I think that the church plays a huge part in our lives.
Aid to the church in need really helped a lot, and even in this post-war period, it continues to help. What we have to admit, and I heard it from others too, is that aid to the church in need really has a heart. They are not huge sums that people can throw around, but we can always count on a heart that cares whenever we make an appeal. We had an experience of this when we had to renew the church and the parish house, in the rebuilding of the smaller churches on the outskirts, and the convents, and of course the school centre, because aid to the church in need helped in the reconstruction of the Catholic school centre.
The significance of the Catholic School Centre is huge in itself, and the contribution for its renewal is huge. The opening of the school for Croatian Catholics is an encouragement to refugees to return to their homeland. Franjo Lukenda was one of the first to take advantage of this opportunity.
At the end of 9th grade, I heard that they were going to open a Catholic school centre. I thought that I'd attend the high school in Banja Luka. In fact, I'd already applied. After I heard that they would be opening a Catholic school centre, I immediately withdrew my application and submitted my application to the Catholic school centre. I think it will give me an ideal basis for any university, and I hope to study informatics in some West European country. My family was more than pleased when I told them that I would enroll in the Catholic school centre. They think that I'm very smart, and that I can and I should gain as much knowledge as possible so that I can use it to my advantage when I'm old enough.
In Kotovarosh, a small town 30 kilometres from Banja Luka, the ill-treated Croat Catholics are slow about coming back. The only encouragement or help, whether material or spiritual, is from the church. Ilja Maric tells of the help that the priests offered him during those days that were full of hardships.
All the priests who were here and those who have left tried very hard. They came every day in the morning and in the evening to encourage us and to see how we were getting on. And Bishop Komarica was encouraging us in every way. He came to the refugees in Ogulin, in Karlovac, in Varaždin, to Bielovar and Orachovica and Virovitica. There's no way he didn't go to boost the people saying, now law has returned, that now we can return to our homesteads, that there is no need to sell our homes for pittance. Now that was a big uplift.
The church still bears the scars of war destruction. Slowly and painfully it is being renewed, just like the Croatian Catholic community, who, without the help of people of goodwill, could never survive in this town. The parish priest of VUKOVIĆ is extremely grateful to all contributors.
The only organization which heard the cries for help in reallocating and bringing empty houses back to life was the church. We cannot hope for anything from the civil services because we haven't anyone there. Unfortunately, there is no representative of the Croatian people in the government here who would lobby for us or who would help our people. We had someone before, for 4 years, who was Croatian, but he was powerless to help because in the end it is the head of the committee who decides where the funds will go. We had recourse only to the church. The state gave something minimal, material to renew 3 houses and something of the infrastructure, so that it was mostly Caritas that we relied on. Up to a certain point, it was just the German Caritas, but there was very little. We placed a lot of hope in the new Croatian Republic, but we were grasping at straws. The people, above all else, need moral support, and I believe that the church were number 1. In second place is economic help, not just materials for building a house, but people need to be able to make a living from something. So we as a people and as a church and as a parish community are surviving precisely because we can depend on our diocese, on Caritas and on the good-hearted people that are connected with them. This precious organization, Aid to the Church in Need, has responded not once but twice to our list of necessities with concrete help. This year too they will send almost everything that we mentioned. So a lot of the things we did already, such as the restoration, the built-in supports, the copper roof, and we have erected 2 towers. In that, they helped us as much as they could. I thank them with all of my heart. They are the only ones who helped us to that extent. Aid to the Church in Need through our diocese will decorate the inside of the church too, replacing the windows, the doors, the glass, etc. This is just a drop in the great sea of our needs, and I want to extend my heartfelt thanks.
Even though only a very small number of refugees returned to their homes this year, the Catholic Croats of the Banja Luka diocese are not giving up. More of them would return if even the minimum requirement for employment and reconstruction of the ruined homesteads was offered. The parish priest of VUKOVIĆ isn't giving up hope that with Caritas and the help of good people, Catholics will remain and preserve their heritage here despite the hardships.
I believe that Catholics will, however, continue to live here. Catholics will stay right up to the last man, and we have a few young families too. I'm in my latter years, and sometimes I start to think I really shouldn't have come back. But when I go to church and speak to the priests, or when I go to see the bishop in Banja Luka, I get enough encouragement for the next 2 or 3 years, and I continue on. So much so that I am convinced that not even St. Rocco or St. Francis will allow us to disappear, just as St. Francis didn't allow the oppressors to destroy the church in Banci. That is a sign that we are alive, and this house, this church, is a place of refuge. Whoever has nowhere to go can stay here.